Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel, the Noetic Warrior YouTube channel, or if you're watching on Facebook, welcome to NDEs Ireland. Let me tell you something, and you already know this if you've had a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience. Near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences are not mental illness. They are not mental illness. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, as for myself, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I work in the mental health service, in the mainstream mental health service in Ireland as a social worker. So I understand the language of the mental health professions. My colleagues are social workers, psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, occupational therapists, psychologists. And I've been working in the mental health service since 2010. Now, when I speak publicly, as I am now, I'm not representing my employer. Okay? And I just need to say that to avoid any misunderstanding, because my contract does not allow me to speak publicly on behalf of my employer. So that's that out of the way. Now, for myself, I'm not sure if I had a near-death experience or not. At 10 years old, I had a bicycle accident. I was cycling down a hill at full speed, lost control of the bike, fell off, hit my head on the road really hard. And there was nobody around. We didn't wear helmets back in the days. I don't think I even heard of a bicycle helmet back in the days. In those days, please wear your helmets now that we have them. And I was outside my body, looking down at it, looking at all the surroundings. And I know the area, it's close to where I grew up, and I could see everything as clearly outside of my body as I would have inside it. Now, I don't know if my body was physically dead at the time because I was there on my own, but this was not disassociation, because I've had that too. Disassociation is something that can happen when you have a very traumatic experience, and at least the way I've experienced it, it's like I felt like I'm not in my body, but I know that I am. On this occasion with this accident, I was definitely outside and wondering, how do I get back in? And saying to God, I don't want to die yet. And I felt no pain, absolutely no pain. Just wondering, how do I get back in, you know? So, next thing I know, I was back in, and I was in a lot of pain, and I'm sure I had concussion afterwards and possibly a cracked skull. But back in those days, the treatment was an ice cream. Okay, I'm kind of joking a little about the circumstances, but I needed the emergency department, but I got ice cream anyway. So, and I slept for a number of days. If you know, if that happens to anyone, get the medical attention, please. But the point I'm making is, I was not in my body, and I only remembered that within earlier this year. I remember the accident all my life, but I only remember being outside my body within the last year. So maybe I did have a near-death experience, I don't know. I've had quite a few spiritually transformative experiences that I have had experiences similar to someone who had a near-death experience. So I've been in the heavenly realm, I've met beings of light, I've been on the receiving end of the most beautiful unconditional love. I've seen the whole reason, the whole meaning behind all the experiences I've had in life. And I've seen the rest of my lifetime as well, and the influence I would have on people around me in my life, all in these spiritually transformative experiences. And I remember even at 4 years old coming from a place of light and not quite remembering exactly where it was. Anyway, the point is, I've remembered a lot of these experiences, and they've more come back to my memory in the last 4 years. So on top of that, this year I have the spiritual healer within me has awoken. So I have all these experiences and abilities, and yet I'm working in the mainstream mental health service. And I don't feel out of place. I don't feel out of place. So I had a conversation recently with the clinical director, and I thought it was going to be a 2-minute conversation, but we ended up talking for an hour and talking about near-death experiences, and he was really fascinated. He had already in his personal time looked up near-death experiences on YouTube. He had a lot of questions, a lot of interest. And in the conversation, we were talking about, I was telling him that the scientific research is out there to show that these experiences are not mental illness. So he asked me to bring knowledge of that science into the mental health service to educate our colleagues, which we hope will prevent people who have near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences from, hopefully will prevent a misdiagnosis. Okay, so that was a really exciting opportunity, and I'm in the process of preparing that presentation for my colleagues. Now, with my colleagues, the language they speak is based on science, scientific evidence base. It's a scientific evidence-based language that they speak, or that we all speak. I speak it in my job too. So those of us, it's not the language of everybody. Those of us who have had either near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences do not need science to know that what we experienced is real. So this is for those who have whose profession demands and expects them to have a scientific evidence base for the practice that they do. Now, having spoken to psychiatrists and my colleagues just on our break time, or just chatting about near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences, a lot of them already know these things are real, but when we have the scientific evidence base, then we can bring it into our work. I mean, I have taught social work students. I've lectured in UCD, University College Dublin, to social work students, and even as a professional, as an educator, I'm always saying, what's your approach based on? Show me the scientific evidence base. Is that going to help the person? If you think something else might work, like for me, example, I'm a martial artist also. Having practiced martial arts for many years, I felt it helped improve my own mental health because I have suffered from depression in the past. It certainly did help. So I started to look up, is there scientific evidence? I mean, I knew that already, that it would help, but I started looking up to see if there was a scientific evidence base to show that it would help, and there is. So then at one point I wanted to bring martial arts into my mental health social work practice, and it didn't quite happen, but the evidence base is there. So I guess this video is for those professionals out there who need the scientific evidence base to practice, and also to help prevent the misdiagnosis of people. And I know people who have been misdiagnosed, people who have ended up in psychiatric hospitals that did not need to be there. And even, people who maybe they have family or relatives or friends who think, oh, that person, my beloved family member, they're talking about unconditional love and seeing beings of light. Maybe they have some sort of mental illness. Okay, well that is not the case. So the scientific evidence base is part of what helps to clear things up and reveal the truth. So I was telling my colleague about Dr. Bruce Grayson, who is the founder of IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And he, as a young intern at the start of his career, some of you may know this story already, he was having lunch eating spaghetti, and he dropped some spaghetti sauce on his tie. He tried to clean it up, it left a pink stain, and then next thing he was called to the emergency room because somebody had attempted suicide. He went to see the person who had attempted suicide, and as a young psychiatrist, and they were unconscious. They had been unconscious on arrival in the hospital. In another part of the ward, there was the person's roommate. He went to speak to her to find out what had happened, and the roommate didn't really know the person. They were roommates in college at the start of the college year, and she had found this person unconscious, having attempted suicide. I think it might have been an overdose or something, and she called the ambulance, got her to the hospital, and they had this conversation back and forth between them. So the next day, the Bruce Grayson came back to check on the person who had attempted suicide, and she was awake, and he started to introduce himself, and she said, "Oh, I know who you are." He was wondering, "How could you know who I am? We've never met before." "Well, we have met, but you were unconscious." Anyway, she explained, "Yes, I know who you are," and she was able to recall the whole conversation that he had with her roommate, even though they were in a different part of the ward. And Bruce was shocked. There's nothing in his psychiatric training had prepared him for this. And she said, "Yeah, you had a pink stain in your tie," and that was even further evidence for him, that what she was saying was true. Not only was she able to recall the whole conversation, but she was able to point out a detail on his tie with the spaghetti stain. So that left him perplexed. He tried to check if the roommate had come into the room where she laid unconscious to explain to her what she had told Dr. Grayson, but the roommate never came into that room. And the person only came to the following day. She had been sleeping all through the night, unconscious all through the night. So this set Dr. Bruce Grayson on a path of trying to understand what happened, and he got into studying near-death experiences for the next 40 years, and he has summarized his scientific evidence research in this book called After, and I think this was published in 2022, 2021, and he did a lot of research. So I was explaining to my colleague that over the years, every time you come to a conclusion, every time you do research, there's something there are limitations. So people will challenge him with the limitations, not even in a nasty way, but in a scientific way. Say, "Well, what about this? Is it to do with chemicals in the brain? Is it to do with this? Is your research methodology correct?" So he invited in all those questions rather than being defensive. He invited all the questions in. He had skeptics challenge him, and they would say to him, "Well, I don't think you're right. This is what I think it is." And he would say to them, "Okay, well, let's research that." And time again, he came to the conclusion that near-death experiences are real. Okay? So I explained all this to my colleague, who is the clinical director, and he was saying, "Well, there is so much that we just cannot explain. There are so many phenomena in the world that we can't explain, and there's so much about humanity that is beyond explanation at this stage." He wasn't undermining what I was saying. He was just saying that basically what others have said, I think even Dr. Bruce Grayson said this: a science that does not challenge itself to go beyond its boundaries is not really science. And my colleague was saying it's important that we go further beyond the boundaries to understand truth and reality. It was a very supportive conversation. Now, I said to him as well, the longer I work in the field of mental health, the less I know what mental illness is. I know what we say in the profession that it is, But when you get to the heart of it, when you get to the root of it, I wonder, when you look at it from a spiritual point of view, it's much more than what is commonly understood. So, for example, my own experience with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, as they are called, as much as I did not like to go through those experiences, I have to say they were great teachers for me. They propelled me onwards in life to go beyond fear, to go beyond limitation, to discover strength within myself, to discover what, I want to get his name right, Jerry Long, I think his name was, to discover the defined power of the human spirit. As in the defined power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to grow despite adversity, to use the adversity as the soil in which the seed is planted, we being the seed, that we can grow from that. So I always feel that rather than blocking out traumatic events that we have experienced, the importance is to, as gently and as kindly and respectfully as we can, the important thing is to integrate them so that we can grow from them. And that's easier said than done, I know. I know from personal experience, but it is possible. And when I think I saw a quote, I can't remember who it was, they thought they buried us, but really what they did was plant a seed, and that seed grew from being in the soil. It grew into something powerful, something great, something awesome, something beautiful. So that's my experience of depression and overcoming it, and I find it really hard to personally to describe depression as a mental illness, even though categorically it is seen as that. And I've had that conversation with my colleagues, and some see my point, some disagree, but I don't mind. My experience is my experience. And when I say they disagree, they're always respectful about it. I'm not knocking anybody. Now, here's another one. When Bruce Grayson was challenged, I don't even know if he was challenged in a nasty way or just in a questioning way, is our near-death experiences some form of schizophrenia or psychosis? Okay, so the answer is no, they're not. But just to explain, psychosis is seen as hearing voices that other people don't hear. This is in the mainstream, hearing voices that other people don't hear, seeing things that other people don't see, and having what are called delusional ideas. Now, if you've had a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience, like me, you may see beings that others don't see. You may hear voices that others don't hear. You may have visions of what can be. So that's, yet the two are different. It's like if you have a game like golf and a game like pool, the objective is to use a stick to get a ball into a hole, but they're two completely different things. So in my conversation with the clinical director, I spoke about, I use schizophrenia as an example. So if you have somebody who is diagnosed with schizophrenia and they don't take medication, over the years they deteriorate. We have what are called negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Okay, so that means basically your get up and go has got up and gone. It might be called lack of motivation, but I was saying, what? Lack of motivation, is that laziness? Is it disinterest? It's not. It's neither of those things. It's just like your get up and go has got up and gone, So I remember speaking to somebody with this condition at one point and trying to engage him in conversation. And I asked him, what does he like? And he told me gardening. So I thought, I personally like gardening as well. So I thought, here's a topic we can talk about. And I said, oh, what do you do? What sort of gardening do you do? And he said, I cut the grass. And that was it. And it's not just that he said, oh, I cut the grass. It was, I cut the grass. And every question I asked was, yeah, no, yeah. So it was that's kind of called a flattening of speech. And it was, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. Now, take somebody who has a near-death experience and doesn't take the same medication that would be recommended for schizophrenia. Okay, so I have a friend, a near-death experiencer, who one day I was looking to speak, to talk to them, and they said, I can't speak right now because I'm working on this really big project. And they started to explain what the project was, and if things had gone wrong, their team, which she was managing, would have been questioned, why is it not working? So she had to concentrate for a couple of weeks and on that project, and then would be able to talk to me afterwards. So when I heard what the project was, I'm not going to name it here because I don't know if they want me speaking publicly about it, but I told my colleague what it was in our one-to-one conversation. This project was something I had heard about on the radio. It was a global phenomena. It's a one of its kind in the world. It's a unique project that required a lot of technological input, and they were talking about it on the radio here for a week or 2 weeks, about how amazing and how awesome it was. And I said, wow, that's the project my friend is working on. And I was telling this to my colleague, and I said, there's no way that somebody with negative symptoms of schizophrenia would be able to do this, And he was saying, yeah, there's no way they would. But anyway, it was a very interesting conversation we had, and what I thought would be a 2-minute conversation turned into an hour-long conversation. And that's when he asked me to bring knowledge of the science of near-death experiences into the workplace so that our colleagues could avoid misdiagnosing people. I've just remembered another part of the conversation I had with him. Some of you watching this know Lorna Byrne or know of her. I met her a few times last year, and she speaks openly about this, so that's why I mentioned her name. But she has said that she has been through so much physical illness, the fact that she is physically alive today absolutely defies science. And she's in her 70s and is going around with the energy of a 50-year-old, she's quite amazing, quite an amazing person. And she's had a number of near-death experiences and is, since childhood, I think her whole life is a spiritually transformative experience. Like, she doesn't understand why we can't all see angels, or why we don't all hear the voice of God, and she's a very practical, down-to-earth person. But I explained some of this to my colleague, and he said, there's no way you'd put her in a psychiatric institution. What would be the point? And I know she, in her youth, she was afraid to talk about what she was experiencing in case that would happen. But when I had a longer conversation about her than that. But he said, no, there's no way you would put her. There's no way you would diagnose her, and absolutely no way you would put her in a psychiatric institution. Okay. So there are millions of you out there that would absolutely not meet the criteria for any form of mental illness, and therefore you do not deserve any misdiagnosis, you do not deserve any stigma, you do not deserve any fear-based response or any response based on ignorance or lack of knowledge. So that's why I'm putting this out there. I want people to know that the science is out there, And as I say, if you've had these experiences, you don't need the science, but there are those who didn't have those experiences, those like my colleagues who work in the mental health services, who make big decisions about people's that affect people's lives. They need to know the science so that the impact they have on people's lives is positive and helpful and wholesome and respectful and healthy, and basically sets you up to thrive. Or even if you're having trouble integrating your experience, and I believe that can take up to 10 years, according to the research, that even a colleague one of my colleagues can help and support you with that integration. It's important that the knowledge of the science gets out there. So if you bear with me now, I'm just going to read some of Bruce Grayson's passage from his book I'm going to read a passage from his book. I'm going to read a passage from his book that helps to explain that near-death experiences are not mental illness. And I'm going to pause this while I laugh. Okay, I'm back. Now, just to mention, it is possible, according to the research, and by the way, Bruce Grayson is not the only doctor to have researched on this. There's Dr. Pim van Lommel in the Netherlands. There's Dr. Peter Fenwick in the UK. Dr. Long, is it Dr. Jeffrey Long? I can't remember his first name. There's loads of it out there. But I happen to be referring to Bruce Grayson's research. Okay, so on page 87, he says, a number of clinicians have written about the distinction between unusual experiences that are symptoms of mental illness and those, like near-death experiences, that are spiritually transformative. One of many differences, is that NDEs are triggered by life-threatening or otherwise extreme events. Also, they are usually short-lived and happen only once. And they often happen to people who are leading normal, productive lives. Mental illness, on the other hand, can happen without any obvious trigger, tends to go on for long periods or to recur again and again, and often happens to people with significant psychological difficulty or marginal social functioning. Another difference is that NDEs and episodes of mental illness vary greatly in how they are remembered later on. NDEs are remembered vividly for decades after the event and are often remembered as realer than real. Their memory doesn't fade over time, but retains its vividness and richness of detail. In contrast, people with mental illness usually realize after the acute episode is over that their visions were unreal. And memories of an episode of mental illness fade over time, becoming less vivid and less detailed until they are completely forgotten, as are most dreams. And here's another thing. I've often heard my colleague describing schizophrenia or as being caught up in a nightmare that you cannot wake up from. And I've seen this with patients. It is frightening for most of them. Very different from someone describing a near-death experience. Okay. Additionally, people who have had NDEs often re-examine their experience again and again in order to seek and develop insight into the meaning of their experience. They often seek out other experiencers to share their NDEs and insights. If they're disturbed at all by their NDE, it's usually only until they can figure out how to weave the experience and its lessons into their lives. On the other hand, people with mental illness usually avoid any reminders of their unusual thoughts and perceptions, and they don't seek to understand them. They generally don't want to share their experience, which they most often find permanently disturbing. And that's something I've noticed too. Once somebody gets beyond the episode of schizophrenia or hallucination, they just want to leave it behind and get on with their lives. And by and large, it takes medication for someone to get to that stage. Somebody with a near-death experience, they are so happy to talk about it again. It's like reliving the experience. It's beautiful. They're back in this place of unconditional love, and yeah, it's as someone who knows both near-death experiencers, spiritually transformative experiencers, and people with schizophrenia, the differences are very outstanding. Okay. And finally, according to the on page 88 here now, finally, NDEs usually lead to an enhanced sense of meaning and purpose in life, increased joy in everyday things, decreased fear of death, and a greater sense of the interconnectedness among all people. As a result, people who have NDEs often become less absorbed in their own personal needs and concerns, and more altruistic and compassionate towards others. They often have positive outcomes after their NDEs and don't generally struggle with day-to-day life. Not sure about that one. I think day-to-day life can be a struggle, but for anyone. But yeah, that's probably it. Look, if you've had a near-death experience, maybe tell me what you think about that in the comments. I think everybody struggles, whether you've had a near-death experience or not, at different points in their lives, even beyond the NDE, but they don't struggle in the sense of mental illness related to an NDE. They are two different things, as I said. Now here's another one. Bruce Grayson says, on the other hand, people with mental illness may lose their sense of meaning in life and joy in daily activities, feel more fearful and isolated from other people, and become more absorbed in their own needs and concerns and less involved with others. Part of my role as a mental health professional is specifically helping people to find meaning in their life. Okay? Helping people to find meaning in their experience, helping people to grow because they have found meaning in their experience. So, but possibly that is often lost, you know. But of course it is possible to find meaning in life no matter what experience you've had. And there I refer to the works of Viktor Frankl, who are central to my own therapeutic approach. Okay, well, Bruce Grayson says this in the next line. Of course, all these distinctions between NDEs and mental illness are generalizations, and there will be exceptions to them all. Okay? So, he says the evidence is that NDEs are not associated with mental illness. Now, at some stage in the book, he does say you can have a mental illness and on top of that have a near-death experience, but the two are not the same. But also, whether you have a mental illness or not, a near-death experience is not a mental illness. So please share this, share it with your colleagues, share it with anyone you know. If you have colleagues in the mental health services or in the medical professions or in the psychotherapeutic professions, please share this video with them. And I believe it will help others. When I get to do my actual presentation that I give to my colleagues in the mental health service, I'll do a video on that. Excuse me. I'll do a video here on that also. So, and that one will probably be even more valuable for bringing clarity and for reducing misdiagnosis and for reducing misunderstanding, you know. So that's it for today, folks. Love, love, love. Have a beautiful day, have a beautiful week, and look forward to seeing you at the next get together of NDE STE Ireland on Zoom, which is going to be on Sunday. Let me just check. I'll pause and check. Yes, Sunday, 28th of July, 2024. Look out for the Zoom link. Okay, take care, please. Any questions you have, any comments you have, please put them in the chat. and right in the chat. Put them in the comment section, whether on Facebook or YouTube. Okay, have a beautiful day. Wishing you the best. Lots of love, soul brothers, soul sisters. Love, love, love. Bye-bye.